was in my early 20s house-sitting for my parents while they were on vacation in the Bahamas. I hadn't lived with them for a couple of years, but naturally, I made myself right at home. At the time, my parents were still the proud owners of our family dog, Buster. He was a German Shepherd lab mix who, in his heyday, which was long before this event, was quite the guard dog and a lovey boy. He was still a lovey boy at this point, but almost entirely blind and was starting to go deaf. No way my parents were going to kennel him. I wouldn't have allowed it even if they had considered it. Anyway, it was just me, Buster, and though he has no relevance to the story, I also had my bearded dragon Hank with me. Rest in peace to both those perfect boys, but on with the story. My parents' house isn't scary, not in the least, but things have happened there that are strange, and this falls into that bucket. I was comfortable being alone, and that night I'd lined up a series of scary movies to watch for the night. It was still early, and since I knew I'd be getting trick-or-treaters, I'd prepared to start with the lesser of the scary, so as to not make myself have a heart attack every 2 minutes. I turned down the lights, but not off, lit some candles, and started Gremlins. I was unintentionally and almost just subconsciously listening to the sounds around me and outside. The slightly muted sound of children's laughter and yelling, parents telling their kids to slow down. I could hear the movie starting, and therefore the sound inside became louder than outside. But then, I heard something else, and it was more clear than any of those other sounds. "Dinner's ready," the voice said. Instantly, I jumped back up from the couch, and I did a 360. It was my mother's voice, unmistakably, yet the words she spoke seemed distorted just a little. Oh, and she was in the Bahamas. "Dinner's ready," she called out again, a little quieter this time, and from behind me. I turn. As I do, I realize Buster was looking in the same direction as me. He then looked to me, and then back where he was originally looking. He heard it too. I know he did because then he stood up and started walking to the kitchen, like he would do any time my mom was in the kitchen, especially at dinner time. Her tone was familiar in that it was my mom's voice, yet it was all so confusing. It was like her voice had lost its warmth and was significantly dulled as it trailed off. Something was urging me to investigate, but what was I looking for? My mom was absolutely not here. Still, I walked around the living room, then the kitchen, and eventually I'd walked the entire house. Hank on my shoulder the whole time, but yeah, we found nothing. I was clearly still alone. Then, standing in the hallway between my room and my parents' room, I hear something new. Her laugh. It's followed by her saying something I can't quite understand. It sounds just as close as her words did earlier, like her voice, but different somehow. I walked deeper into the dimly lit hallway, but I heard nothing. I tried to stay as quiet as possible, creeping slowly back to the living room, looking everywhere as I did. A sudden knock on the door startled me. Trick-or-treaters. Dressed in colorful costumes, several children had arrived seeking their candy. I hurriedly greeted the children with a smile, handing out their goods while trying to push away the eerie feeling that had enveloped me the last who knows how many minutes. I found myself just mindlessly giving aggressively large handfuls of candy to these kids, clearing the bowl. I decided it was time to turn the lights off and try to chill without the interruptions, hoping eventually I would just fall asleep. I knew I'd be okay, but I wanted the night to just sort of disappear. This wasn't the first time I'd experienced such an occurrence in that house, and I haven't been the only one. On 2 previous occasions, I heard this mimic, and one of those times, so did my dad. But Halloween seemed to be an amplified occurrence, multiple mimics. Maybe because the night was set up to be so artificially scary, I truly didn't expect something to happen that wasn't a manufactured scare. I decided to stop pacing around the house, and eventually, I actually started watching the movie. But all night, it was like I couldn't stop thinking about the voice. I kept recalling what had happened, even though I couldn't hear it anymore. I'd look over at Buster, and he'd be looking towards the kitchen, then back over at me. What was he seeing, or hearing, feeling? I really wish I could have asked him. That night, I had a dream that my mother walked through the front door, a smile pasted across her face. She turned away from me and towards the kitchen. Then she started speaking. I don't even remember what she said, but it felt so real, like I was experiencing a past moment. It was so strange, but it felt like I was in middle school. I could almost recall the moment as though it was real. No idea what any of this means. My mom was alive during all of this and still is to this day. So what's her voice and essence doing lingering around that house? Or is it not hers?
Okay, so back in the spring of 2006, I was a 10-year-old girl living in Idaho. My family weren't rich, not even really well off. On holidays, my parents would send us to our auntie's place because she had time off due to being a teacher, and my parents both worked full-time. There were 3 of us kids, myself included. Unfortunately though, my auntie was single at the time and only had 1 small spare bedroom. When I mean small, I mean it was probably only intended for storage. A single bed barely fit in it. So this meant our oldest sister, Rachel, stayed in there. And my younger sister, Becky, and I slept in the living room. 1 on the couch, 1 on cushions on the floor. Us kids had all experienced slightly creepy things over the years in this house. Yes, as small as it was still a house. Yet they were all so subtle. Individually, we could just dismiss them. But after this event, we all started sharing our experiences and realized something was going on and had been for quite some time. This event I'm about to describe still gives me chills to this day, and just thinking about it makes my eyes tear up. So it was the spring vacation. My sisters and I had spent the day playing around outside, doing kid stuff. You know, riding our bikes, playing around, etc. All within sight of the house, of course, stranger danger and all that. The day was warmer than usual and we were all kinda tired from our day, so I opted to go to bed early for us anyway, at around 10. My younger sister Becky and I chatted a bit while laying on our makeshift beds for sleep. Becky was suddenly not replying, so I knew she'd fallen asleep, so I settled myself in to go to sleep as well. It came easily and I was soon sleeping. I awoke in the middle of the night suddenly. No idea of the time because it was dark, but I'd guess anywhere between 12 to 2 a.m. I had no way to know though. I lay there on the couch trying to get back to sleep when I thought I saw something near the end of the couch. Saw isn't the right word though, because I looked and looked as my eyes adjusted to the dark, but nothing was there. It was more that I sensed something. Starting to feel creeped out, I looked down at Becky to see if it was maybe her, but she was sleeping soundly. I pulled my blanket over my head and tried as hard as I could to convince myself that there was nothing there. With the blankets over my head, that sense that someone was at the end of the couch became so intense that it was overwhelming. I couldn't take it and threw the blanket off and peered in the direction. Nothing. Still unnerved, but glad no one was there, I settled back down to sleep. And then I heard it. "Sam, what are you doing?" The voice was so faint and familiar, like the speaker was trying to not wake Becky but also didn't want to whisper. It was coming from the end of the couch. "Sam, what are you doing?" This time, a little louder, but exactly the same. It was my auntie's voice, but seemed devoid of any of the cheerfulness that she always had. "Aunt Sue?" I squeaked out, terrified but unsure what to do. "Sam, what are you doing?" This time, right behind my head. That was it. I jumped up and ran to my aunt's room as fast as I could, screaming the whole way. The commotion woke Becky up, who instinctively followed after me in a daze. I flung open the door to my aunt's room and, of course, she was still there, now sitting up in bed startled. I explained what happened as best as I could, and Becky and I slept in my aunt's bed with her for the rest of the stay. Unbelievably, my older sister, Rachel, slept through all of the commotion. That girl could sleep through anything. Weird things continued to happen to all of us there, and my aunt eventually moved. That was the scariest night of my life, and also the scariest thing to have happened to any of us in that house. I still have no idea what that was, and now cannot fall asleep on a couch, still to this day.